Hi everyone, it's Jen from Mind's Eye, and today we're gonna look at a look into the unknown, and it is psychic medium reading about obscurities, and we're gonna go right into what it is like relevant to today, and it really is about rhetoric, and it really is current to the day, and it has to do with anti-Semitism to the issues with Germany and Japan and Italy, and what was true because when you actually look at obscurities, it goes to a file of known and unknown. And when it goes to the file of known and unknown, it was put into a filing cabinet that can stay as a psychic. And then it was left away at a known of a tone of a loan. So it really was spelled differently in 1932 through 1942 during the time of the rise of the Reich. And when that happened, you couldn't even do it hard enough. And then here in America, we were kind of like toning it down a notch. We were trying to go into rest mode post World War One, and there were some other things that were happening in America. And when this happened, it went right down to Argentina, and then it went right back up to Cuba. And then when it hit Cuba, it talked about Alaska to Antarctica, and then Antarctica over to Russia. So it was really hard on like tracing on exactly what they're showing me a little bit in mediumship, and then what they're showing me, what I'm allowed to see of this obscurity. But it really was a hold down the tone and the phone and have everything DONE, because when you actually like sit and you listen to how it plays out as the protests come through, you're really not seeing a whole lot of Nazi or the Third Reich or SS or anything of that nature. And mind you, they had like subgroups in each of the countries of like who was special forces, and just like how we do still to this day, even at border control, we have special forces that just go in and do that you can't explain exactly how it is. So when I sit here and I actually see it as a psychic, it was like a gift of atonement. And it really was something of a go about. But it went as far as go back as like Anastasia Romanoff, where this had this incident where they couldn't get anything done. And it really was like such an obscurity to their senses that it actually was premonitions that came true. And that's where Pandora's box comes in, and that conspiracy theory. And then when it actually comes in and it like riles through, as they say, and files through as what we're putting away in each of these like odd cases that come up and like criminal activity, that you just actually can't get anything done. So when you actually see and you get anything done, you go, hold the phone. I actually like did 4 tests today. It was absolutely perfect. So going back to it, because a lot of the topics is the law of one, the law of all, and then Ra, and then Tutalani Asia, which is really out of Flying Fox, where out of Africa, where he went haywire at the end due to reconnaissance lift. That is, if you have been in artillery or in like mortar, when it lifts, it really is a kick off from that chute of above. And when it comes from above, you can't get anything done because the blast sound is like a sound reassurance. And then everything clouds your judgment. So that's why there's called a turn off. So when you actually do this like turn off, you can't have anything of this point of getting anything done. So even to this day, injuries have been talked about of coming back into the next life, especially the talk of how Hitler was so inundated and immunated, as they said, with his issues with pharmaceuticals and polypharmacy at the end, that you couldn't understand how like 3 pills could actually mimic syphilis. So when you talk about the law of one and the law of all, really it talks about how this rhetoric with Luciferianism all the way down to Satanism, to devil and demon worship, as what we know today as what was that driving force around COVID, that you couldn't really see it coming, but there definitely was a fear mongering of what was true and what was not. And it was really clouded judgment because we were all sick. And so when we sat and we listened, we couldn't understand exactly what was true and what was not. You just kind of had to roll with it. But this definition of the law of one, the law of all, it truly means this. When you go about your day and you say, I have been impeded, and you're probably the strongest one in the area, that means all have been impeded. And that means all start kind of talking and rising up, which means when it comes down to law and legislature, it means everyone is in that lump. It almost becomes libel. So when it becomes libel, which is one of the hardest things to prove in any court, because you have to show that you have been suppressed all the way down to the highest max where you can't get anything done, it truly means something is wrong. So when I actually see it, when it went to Flying Fox doing Rata Lana Masiani Adita Da, it really was like this gibberish at the end because he was so like ranting and ramped and riled up that you couldn't see it coming, whatever he was going to do. It really has to do with actual judgment of senses, because they'll sit there and someone will, like, if you've been through even those who were in the bombing in Oklahoma in the 90s or anything, or 9/11, they'll sit there and just stare like this. They really are scrying. Their gifts come through. It has to do with like a lot of head injury also, and vibrations, where they'll sit and they'll scry and look way past and can track energy so hard that they can actually see through something that's highly blocked and locked and up to the judgment. It is like an alleviation of struggle, but when he was saying that, he was trying to break apart as what they're showing me as psychic medium in Africa and what he needed to do next. Mind you, that man was really heinous, very, very heinous. This is like the type of talk that makes everyone upset, because when I actually go back to the Jewish community during that time, because those dictatorships were just as heinous on how they executed out due justice to do, it went right back to the Jewish community and anyone else as a rip so on a fine line that looked like a wheel of fortune, that you could actually spin it and say today is what was due. So when I see it and I say what obscurities are still out here today, because that is what the energy is telling me right now, that's what we need to know and do. It's not something foreseen, but when you actually look at it, there is no victory, but there is this like offer so good that comes through. And I'm seeing on a big level and on a small level, to where it looks dishonorable, highly dishonorable. It really is so addictive when you see this devil card in reverse that you just can't see it coming. But it is deceitful, and it is a little hostile, and it is a little hostage-like. But when I'm seeing this Lover's card, it really is a marriage contract. And it's not like one for nuptials. It's old-fashioned contracts where you sit for like 50 to 75 years in that contract, and it will really hurt, really hurt. That's what this Three of Swords in reverse is. So that is the deal on the table, the DEAL, that will come through as it is coming through as the law of one, the law of all, and then also of Ra Ta Na Ta La Ni Ya Da Di Da Da. So when you're breaking it apart and you say there really is no contract to an actual getting together, which really is hard, you can't even conjure, you can't even kick up energy to actually see it. And those who have actually been through battle or anything of that nature, when they're trying to like see if they can do a pickup or anything of that kind, I can't even get it out fast enough. They're like throwing at me in mediumship that this hangman will cause more of a pause. And that's okay, because sometimes when that happens, you're meant to pause. So it's really not this, and it is this Two of Swords in reverse. So when you see it, it is this X. It is a gift. It is a crossroads. It's no railroad, but it's meant to stop and pause where you're at that crossroad and say, do I do the left or the right? So when I look at this and I say, the Fool, it starts as a new journey, and it really is working about skill. And then you see this magician come through. And this magician is not per se actual magician. It's someone who's highly skilled to where they look apathetic with this Four of Cups. Like no matter what you offer them, it's not good. There's something that was well manifested and well planted. So when I'm looking at manifested and I'm seeing how things have settled down with steel workers, that I actually have to say, watch everything now. You'll catch the hint. So when I see the Queen of Cups in reverse, there is no takeaway of attunement, of intuition, but there's unsecured inheritance that must be like everything that you think about inheritance to your estate. So when I see the Wheel of Fortune, it really is like luck, like St. Patrick's Day luck, Irish luck. And when I see it, I see more in the month of May, and that's where it really is going to hit harder and solidify. You really have to be solid, too solid to where you're isolated. You've got to be on your own at least 3 to 8 days. There's something, it will come through so hard as all forms, and I feel it actually means like when they did these things, they actually were doing warlording and warlocking that's now breaking through during these wartime efforts, even through Vietnam, that these set-ins, even to like Bonnie and Clyde, they were like notorious on putting a lock on something in it, and like on a timer it happens. When do we have it? It's not clued. It's not to scare anyone, because all of a sudden you say, yes, it was due to happen, this hurricane. And then you say, yeah, it was due to have a storm. And that's how it usually is. It's not so much crime, but all of a sudden it will come in through the wind and you'll hear it. It'll cause chaos. So when I see like King of Pentacles, there is this like everything about this king that sits well, sits like balanced with money, with work, with contracts. And then when I see it, here it is. Here's your confirmation. This is the Temperance card. It truly means balance. So there will be this halt stop, but then there's some hidden motives. So then all of a sudden, then you have a lesson of a struggle. And then the Page of Wands in reverse means it really is a put out. It really is a put out. And then all of a sudden it goes, there was that justice. There was that justice. It was very odd to explain the law of one, the law of all, especially when people rise up, especially if it's a large people in like a community. And then also too, when it comes down to everything to Ra as we know it, that you couldn't even see it coming, where someone's like, no, you can't do this. And then they say, there was your justice. That was more than enough. Let's actually look at Literary Witches Oracle and see what other stuff is coming through. Here it is. Braid. So let's actually look at braid. It's identity, survival, and the opinion of others. So let's actually look a little bit more into the Jewish community. 2 more cards on this. It had to do with the body. So this is exactly what they're showing when we talked about Anne Frank, that it had to do with this frailment, as they said, and these huge changes with their health where they couldn't see it coming and then they couldn't even get it done. So when you actually look at it and you say, holy cow, like you just could not, they would just walk into a store and walk out, and the next day they were set in for like skin and bones. So that is where the issues with the World Health Organization came in, because when you look at Schindler's List and they were actually trying to do the steel workers, they had to look at their hands, the way that they were clean and the way that the soap was, because they had to eliminate it. So there was a lot of per se a martial law, but also too they were so sick that they were actually up to like schizoaffective disorder, but they were of clear sound mind. It was very odd to explain. So when it really kicked out, where we had to have papers during COVID, through bird flu to toilet paper, people actually flipped their lid if they were still from World War II era, because they were like, absolutely not, we're not doing this ever again. So when I looked at belonging, you had to actually look at where it came through. And this card right here, milk, it truly is nostalgia. So when I see it, it had to do about freedom also, freedom of speech to their right, to actually being able to have cultural curses, spells, and hexes, to do a curse out, like how we've talked about with Be It Be, where it's positive and negative energy to ions, and you actually have to clear things out. So when you actually look at pawns, it really shows hard on what you need to do. And it was looking inward, inspiration, and uncertainty. There was something that was always on the back of their head to an identity. You couldn't even explain it. It even happened in all of the countries that were experiencing World War II, all the way through Vietnam, to where the Viet Cong would be like known, and then they would show themselves as a give up, and then they would also present themselves as something new. It was very odd with bravery. So when I look at it and I say healing, there are some things that had to be healed, absolutely had to be healed. When I look at glove, it looks like money, status, and complacency to a point of mastery. Where was this mastery where it caused such a huge like gap divide of a rift that you couldn't get anything out? It really, from what they're showing me quickly in mediumship, it was pneumonia. Pneumonia was set in so hard and thick that it sounded like croup cough. So when you see the eye, it really was like seeing clearly and paying attention. A lot of them could see clearly, but most of them could not. Like they had conjunctivitis so bad, it looked nasty. But then you looked at the whites of their eyes, it was clear. So when I see it and I say the path, the dark, and then you see this, they would always find something around night, Nite. So the energy of this is wolf. And it is, a calling and a great expanse. During World War II, all of a sudden it was like I saw it, I heard it, I felt it. And then upon a talk and a look, and then a kick up of a tick up, and then a strange illness to something odd, and then a harsh discovery, like how we always do. And then it was, I think we need to go hunting, and maybe we should go take a walk. There we go. Let's look at the Akashic Tarot. Here it is. You couldn't even like birth an idea, and you couldn't even birth children, like spontaneous abortions, and they would say it was abortion, it was abortion, it was abortion, and they would argue. But really, it was something with their labs, loving elementals. A lot of it had to do with copper within them during 1932, and then also too, it had to do with mercury, because at that time they had mercury thermometers. So when I see this and I say the Queen of Scrolls comes on, it was the documentation of the nurses to the CNAs and to the other healthcare physicians that started looking around and saying this was a clear, and then it was known, and then they would like turn and look and they say, I actually got it. So when I see the Archangel Raphael, it really was like a marble takeaway, like a toss. There was no diversity at that time. Everyone was on the same page. Everyone was the same. So it was unfulfilled wishes because heritage and culture was taken away during that time in multiple lifetimes and eras, that you couldn't, like I said, even celebrate religious facts to artifacts. And that is when journeys would actually come through and moving about. So, descent, I would say, they're a space cadet. It actually was like you're grounded, because you can't even see right. So, views of the ego, absolutely. Were they seeing and hearing everything correctly? At that moment, I would say yes, they were. And when I say yes, they were, it was at different times. But if everyone was on the same page, it was corrected, highly deferred out. So as I look at it and I go, you can't even believe how hard it was to find an actual lily to a flower, to a stem, to a rose, to a road, to a be what may, to a be what may. You couldn't even see the stinger coming. So people would actually come in and it would be like the shark. It would be such a contentment order that you couldn't actually see the oyster and the pearl. And that is where it got scary during all world, like time efforts during World War. It was the worst on what they could do with criminal activity, and it would be right in your face. How is this related today? It was so simply by a thumbs up that somebody could see this cheetah coming, and you'd say, it's spotted. Look at the eczema. And then you would say, look at the way that they're writing. And they would say, no, it's just eczema. And then we say, that's right, it's just eczema. It was so hard back then. So how is that related to Ra? Basically, Flying Fox had so many of like acne at the end from upons and withins, constantly in and out, in and out. And that was the basis of simple Satanism, in and out, in and out, in and out within each other. And that was the scare that we had during the 80s with HIV and AIDS. It was upons and withins, because they were all in on each other, that they ended up having this huge pandemic, because the blood was not well. It was not a culture. So when you see raccoon in this, you couldn't even believe how hard it was coming. Now, when it got to actual like demon, you had like this odd like affect where you were gray green, and then you were normal, and then it would be like they're hard stone. That's what they're showing me in mediumship. When it went to actual like devil, they were always red in the face yelling, and they most of the time as studied they couldn't see past their nose whatsoever, always sick, like ill. When it actually got to Satan, they sat well and calm until it was time to eat. And then when it went to Lucifer, it was like the straight out of Nuremberg stories, as you say. When you see crow, if you saw crow, it was solidified, absolutely solidified. Vulture, that was the hiding of known. To the earthworm, that means the Constance bane was upon you. That literally meant like witches' counsel if you were actually abiding by rights of all. So when you see tiger, that was the one that actually would be out and about in the streets looking. So when I see dragonfly, the messengers were so light to the messages that you didn't need a radio. Otter was the playtime of children. That's what it's showing. To the snake, that when you actually did farming and you see that like where you were seeding, and then you actually heard like the snake, it would come up from the earth. You said, "Oh my gosh, here comes the spider." That's how you knew. It was almost like how we were talking about with Appalachia, where they look at the animals, especially with Native Americans who are highly connected, not only with their gifts, especially with telepathy and what they call sound hearing, high intuitive hearing, that they can look an animal in the eye and know exactly what they were talking about. This octopus was like a carousel effect where you couldn't even see it coming with the law of one and the law of all, because of the way the decree after Reichslag had come through, that you couldn't understand like who was truly impeded and who was like lying so well that they stood straight up. How would that be today? I would have to say, watch how it is with the cattle, on how ranchers are talking about the issues coming in, all the way to the flooding waters, and then see how Easter comes through all the way through May, because I hear rants, and disturbance at bay. So I would actually say it's almost like a tropical storm coming in. It's very odd, very odd. Here we go. Here it is. When it says all of a sudden, like none of this matters, which many people have talked about in the current date and time when it comes to protests and making everything known and heard, it goes surrender, because we'd say none of this matters. Look out. There's common ground. There's still impedance to everyone. And then it goes holding the opposites, extreme of life. I'd have to say yes, because then all of a sudden doors open for people. So when I look at it, there is like coping mechanisms that actually come through in these type of events, which they are by law allowed to do no matter what. It literally states, spontaneous awakening and activation and integration time. you literally couldn't even see it coming. All of a sudden, it was, people have codependency to boundary issues to where it goes. They're just homesick like space cadets again. So when I actually look at it, you have to look at the way everything has played out for you. That's what this card is saying. It says soul plan, the fated life to the destiny life. Is it something that you want to get rid of or actually hear of because you can't even do it? When I see it and I say, talking about rare gift, what people are seeing is actually like a piece of paper, like you don't have to pay taxes anymore. And that was one of the things that was on the table. So, you know, light workers and star seeds, that was a conversation around 1938 and 1942 that people come back into another life as a star seed and a crystal child. And that was about the time that Hitler and Japan were talking about UFOs. And when you talk about UFOs, it was so highly diverted to a diversity that you couldn't even see it coming. All of a sudden, they would stand up and they were topping like topping ice cream when talking gibberish. So when I say higher learning, I can understand where they're coming from with these college issues, where it says, where is our meal plans? Where is our lodging? Where is everything going to? Because we just don't understand why we're paying so much money and we have this. All right. For lack of a better look in, let's look at the Pleiadian Oracle. What do we need to know? Here it is. Song of Your Soul. So that is where the frequency and the hertz of the star seed and the crystal children came in. That they're so high vibrational that they didn't need to have anything coming towards them. That they saw it, they heard it, they felt it, and they can automatically say no. They're very passionate people, as I put it like that. They literally leap like that. When I say Pakal's tomb, this is where it actually gets leery for Flying Fox, because this is where you actually look at the portals that they talk about to the opening of the doors to where it had disrupt in environmental science. So when I say star royalty, I would actually look at the celebrities during that time and how they were creative of getting everything done in a day. Because when you see this and you say dolphin play, it really is a kid's tactic at times of like service, meaning this, like if you have children and they're doing what they need to do, even at homeschooling in the current date and time or at college, but at least they dusted and they vacuumed and they did 1 to 2 things. I bet you any money they accomplished probably 5 to 10 things in one day. It's highly imaginative, but when you see it, all of a sudden, this mothership, for like I said, a lack of a better term, it is how the planes fly and why we have regulations. Crystalline grids, it's truly still highly sensitive, even those who believe in past lives, to like what they used to call it duntalanas, which is the new entries or the new re-entries of souls being born again. It was hard to explain, but even in the Jewish community is a dataraz. The dataraz literally state that you can come into another life and do it again if it was a must do. Many people come back into another lifetime after passing away, that they have to complete out something, and that would be more of finishing out a karmic cycle that as it is written, it shall be done. And that is where it went to heinous times during Jesus's time, to where it went to high creation. And so these were all the explorations that during wartime efforts had come back, because they're so gung-ho on how it played out that you sit and say, I only accomplished this, but I bet you any money when it came to it, all of a sudden you're like, wait a minute, I'm impeded. I'm highly impeded. I couldn't even know it happened. So let's actually close out with the tarot and see what else. Anything else that we need to know. I would look at words as a staged event. I would look at worm. I would look at do it again. I would look at like a toodaloo. I would look at a forms to what they called the formidable review, to where they looked and said rent is due, and then all of a sudden you're like, yeah, I gotta pay my bills. Inheritance. There's something about inheritance that has come through in the last 8 years that you can't understand why everyone is double checking to make sure property lines are correct, and when they pay their taxes, that they have everything in line. And that is like highly through emails, but I'm seeing a letter or two. And this is where victories are actually coming in, like big wins of paying attention to paper. So when I see it and I look at the Page of Pentacles, that is when new opportunities come through. Absolutely. You literally got to sit and you got to be quiet with yourself at certain points of the day to gather your own thoughts, but you'll get the idea. So with that being said, that's all I have to say for tonight. Any questions or concerns, leave a like, a comment, a share. An email is greatly appreciated, and we will talk to you soon, and have a good night.